the meeting from now on. So thanks for joining us in our 6th edition of our webinar series, Getting Through the Crisis Together, Asian Dialogues on Sustainability in the Textile and Garment Industry. Our topic today is Workers' Voices, Impact of COVID-19 on Garment Workers. So as the title indicates, we look at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on workers in the textile and garment industry in Asia. And today we will hear insights from local trade union leaders and an international researcher on workers' rights and how solutions can help both workers and factories. So, but before we do that, I have the pleasure to hand over to Miriam Marquardt. She is the coordinator of the social and labor component at GIZ FABRIC, the hosting organization. So Miriam, welcome, and you have a go.
Thanks, Joost. Thanks very much. So my name is Miriam Marquardt, and I'm the coordinator of social and labor standards of the component at GIZ FABRIC. A warm welcome from my side and also on behalf of the GIZ FABRIC team. To some of you, I would say good morning, and others of you have just concluded their day. And it's really nice that so many of you have joined despite the different time zones. And COVID-19 is really leads to a lot of social distancing, physical distancing, but it also speeds up digitalization and connects people in an unprecedented way virtually. And talking about connection, this is really what our GIZ FABRIC program is all about. We are building connections, and we are funded by the German government, in particular the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And we work in 6 garment producing countries in Asia, in Bangladesh, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, in Vietnam, in Pakistan, and in China. And we connect these regions through regional learning. And we also connect the region to a global audience, such as today through this webinar series on getting through the crisis together. And today we really have a very special webinar because we also want to connect you with a different perspective, a perspective that we've talked upon in the past webinars. We've touched upon that, but we would like to focus on in detail now the workers' perspective. And this also connects to our work. So we work on creating safer working environment, better access to legal advice, better access to information on labor standards. And we do so, for example, by working with the Women's Center in Myanmar, jointly with the C2M, with the Confederation of Trade Unions of Myanmar, and there we provide access to legal advice. We also support the Women Union Network in Cambodia, and we work on safer workplaces, including transport safety. And we use digital tools such as apps to promote knowledge on the local labor law. And therefore, looking into our work, I'm also very excited personally today about the webinar because we can offer you a glimpse into the current challenges through the eyes of workers. So we hear a lot about consumer demand is declining, so order cancellations, factory closures. We hear about the impacts on the local economy and also the global economy. But what does that mean for garment workers? How does that affect their families and their daily lives? And to get an insight on that, we have used an innovative approach. We have set up a participatory photo project, and we would like to share the results with you today. Garment workers from Myanmar and Cambodia took photos of their daily life under COVID-19, and we will share them with you. We also will hear from trade union leaders from both of these countries, from Cambodia and Myanmar, and they will reflect on these videos that we've seen. We'll see the photos and also how that relates to their work as unions. And we get an insight from an international expert on how the COVID-19 crisis relates to on a global level. And Joost will introduce all these wonderful panelists to you in just a second. But I would like to take the occasion and to thank you all for joining, all of the speakers, thanks for joining. And thanks to everybody also who have worked in preparation of the webinar. And thanks also to you, participants today, to join. And I wish all of us a very interesting webinar. And thanks a lot. Over to you, Joost.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can all see my screen now in a second. So you heard already a little bit what's going to happen. So we have a couple of speakers. I will introduce them in a second. First of all, we're going to have some setting the scene by Professor Mark Enner from Penn State University. Then my colleague Eike Helen Feddersen will introduce the photo project we just heard about. We're going to watch 2 short videos, and then we're going to have our talk show style panel with our 3 main panelists from Myanmar and Cambodia, followed by Q&A session, and then the closing remarks by Dr. Stephen Frost from Go Blue. You already heard Miriam Marquardt and saw her live. A few remarks on how we're going to run it. As usual, you are muted at all times if you're an attendee, but you can communicate via the chat box. And I hope you all found the chat box on the right side. I will show you how to find it in a second. But also we are recording the webinar. So if you have to leave early or if there's any reason you drop out, you can see the full webinar later, and we will share the link with everybody who joined today. And the chat button is at the bottom, and it is a little blue button you can see on my screen. And if you write to all participants, and I hope you see that button, then everybody will see your comment or your question. You don't have to write to me or to a single speaker. Please write to all participants that we can see your questions and your comments at all times. So if you have a special questions later to a person, also to Professor Mark Enner, you can name the person first to whom you want to ask the question. And I want now to introduce all our speakers, but before we do that, I think I should introduce, let me see, let me start with, maybe I better introduce all the speakers now, and then I'm going to start with Mark Enner. First of all, I want to introduce you to our speakers from Myanmar and from Cambodia, the voices we talked about. So let me start with Ms. Win Tenji Su, better known as Ma Souley, the Vice President of the Industrial Workers Federation of Myanmar. She's also the chairwoman of the Yangon Industrial Workers Union and worker representative at the township level arbitration body. She works in the clothing factory and works for the rights of her colleagues by negotiating with representatives of international brand manufacturers, factory managers, and owners. As a seamstress in the clothing factory, she can report firsthand on her experience and the difficulties in the clothing industry. Mingalaba. So then over to Cambodia, and I have the pleasure to welcome Mrs. Ken Cheng Lang from Cambodia. She is the Vice President of the Confederation of Cambodian Worker Movement and Education Officer of Collective Union of Movement of Workers since 2015. She worked as a garment worker from 1997 to 2001, before becoming a local trade union president in 1999. Since then, she has moved to various leadership roles in textile and construction unions. In 2016, she became a founding member of the Women Union Network, along with other women leaders from 16 trade unions and the Solidarity Center, the international arm of the AFL-CIO. And Cheng Lang told us that she joined the WUN because it appeared to be a home for women in trade unions where they could meet each other, share challenges, and work together to find solutions. And by the way, she brought a colleague. So if you see her colleague, her name is Mrs. Sumalai from the Solidarity Center, and she might help out if needed because she's going to speak in English, although she's not told us she's not so comfortable to express herself in English, but she will try, and so we will hear her original voice. Mrs. Souley brought a professional translator, so don't be surprised. You will see her speaking, but the voice will be a male voice. So don't be surprised if her voice sounds a little bit deep for. And then last but not least, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Kong Atit, the president of the Coalition of Cambodian Apparel Workers Democratic Union from Cambodia, which is affiliated with the Industrial Global Union. The Cambodian Apparel Workers Democratic Union organizes more than 50,000 workers in Cambodia. And Mr. Kong joined the union in 1999 whilst working in a factory laundry. He was dismissed from his job because of his union activities in 2001, but he continued to work with the union in various functions and leadership roles until he was elected as a president in 2019. Welcome. And last but not least, we have invited Professor Mark Enner from Penn University or Pennsylvania State University. He's a professor of labor and employment relations and political science at the university. He is also the founding director of both the Center for Global Workers' Rights and the school's master program in labor and global workers' rights, which is part of the Global Labor University Network. And Dr. Enner's recent research examines how pricing and other sourcing dynamics in global supply chains affect working conditions and workers' rights. So his research has brought him to Latin America, to Vietnam, but also the corporate social responsibility in the global apparel industry. So let's start, and I would like to hand over to Mark Enner. Mark, you are probably known to our audience already for your report earlier this year, which provided the first quantitative analysis of delayed payments to Bangladesh garment factories and the impact on workers. Can you give us an overview of the big picture now and what impact you have seen on workers since COVID-19 began? And I understand you brought us some slides, which I'm going to show in a second. Over to you, Mark.
Well, do you want me to share my screen? Thank you for that introduction. Or do you have the slides to share?
I'm gonna show the slides in a second. So maybe you can just start and you will see the slides in a second. I'm just opening them.
Okay, because I had a PowerPoint version. I think I sent a PDF version last night. I could do it as well. PDF.
So I will share my screen now, and then you can just.
Is it possible for me to share mine because it has?
Yes, I can. Okay, so if you prefer that, I will do that right away, and I give you the sharing rights and so let me see. It's always a little bit complicated with this software because I have to hand over the ball. I don't know, because probably it's an American software. We'll throw balls. And I just have to, maybe I have to close. Okay, now I can share it. Hang on. Okay. So, Mark, in a second, you will be able to share your screen.
Okay. So then I'll go to the share screen function.
Yes.
And I'll go back.
Yes, it's coming.
It's coming. You can see that.
Full screen, please, and then you're good to go.
We're good? Okay. Well, let me get my timer going so I don't speak. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a real honor to join you today. I really especially appreciate the focus on what this all means for workers and workers' rights. As was mentioned, I've been studying this topic for a long time. I think in the time I have, I'll do three things. First, I'll contextualize what's been going on in supply chains for quite some time. Then I'll mention why the COVID pandemic hit the supply chains so hardly, especially in terms of conditions for workers. And then I'll focus on what's the most recent trends. And I was up yesterday doing some of the latest analysis on trade trends and so on, and what that means for workers. So this, for me to understand supply chain structures and the problems, this is a framework I designed and been working with for a while. I see things starting at the top, the red box, with trade rules, financial deregulation, changing technology. And what's happened over the last 20 years is that the buyer side, the brands and retailers, have actually consolidated considerably. But the supplier side, we see more and more dispersion. And that's through trade rules, the entry of China into the WTO, Vietnam, but the promotion of apparel exports in countries like Myanmar and Ethiopia. So there's a lot of suppliers out there, and there's a fewer buyers that are very consolidated. This leads to a power imbalance in the negotiations between buyers and suppliers. And I've been suggesting this creates two squeezes, a squeeze on the price paid and a squeeze on lead time, the speed to market. And this impacts a whole range of things at the bottom of supply chain. There's a squeeze on wages There's a squeeze on work intensity, production quota, the need to meet quota to keep your job, and that quota can go up every so months. You do 60 operations, you do 70, and so on. Building safety, this issue was flagged for us when Rana Plaza came down. Workers' rights, the ability to have and maintain a trade union organization. And there's also a squeeze on environment and a squeeze on tax revenue for governments, which we could talk about. When I looked at this years ago, I traced the blue line, what was happening to price, the price corporations were paying to suppliers to make their goods, and what happened to workers' rights, the red line. And what I found was the conditions were fairly stable in the 90s, but as the price squeeze came down, every year, respect for workers' rights, the ability to form a union and to bargain, also declined. So this is some of the context. Here are some of my other findings. In Bangladesh at the time when I was doing this, we found the wages were covering 14% of living needs. We found workers were doing up to 72 hours of work per week, sometimes more. We found that overtime was often obligatory. If the child was sick or you weren't feeling well, you often didn't have a choice, and you had to stay late. And this often was linked to these speed to market, fast fashion, the need to get orders off by a certain deadline. And we started to trace, and this was my research in India, increase in production targets from 60 to 80 to 100 operations an hour. And we saw linked to this a rise in verbal abuse because women weren't able to meet these targets when they got so high. The targets had become inhumane. So with all of this, that was the context prior to COVID. Then I put out this report on the impact of the pandemic on suppliers, the factories, and their workers at the bottom of the supply chain. And just a couple of things to pull out of that. Really dramatic cancellation in orders to the point that over 50% of factories were shutting down most of their operations, and 4.5% had closed because these orders were canceled. Most of the small factories were closing. We also found that when cancellations were made, in 91% of the cases, they were made without full payment. And what was happening here was these big companies panicked when there was the lockdown in the European Union, the United States, elsewhere, and said, well, this is like an act of God. We can't control it. Therefore, we are no longer committed to our obligations of the production contract. We're going to cancel the order, and we will not be paying for the cost of that production and process. What this meant for workers was pretty dramatic. What we found at the time was that of the furloughed workers sent home temporarily, 72% were sent home without pay at the time. And of the workers who were outright dismissed, 80% had been sent home without severance pay, as linked to the cases where orders were canceled without payment. So when the factories were not paid by the brands, this is what happened. And we know very quickly the case of Bangladesh. Bangladesh has over 4 million garment workers, about 4.1 million is what the numbers most used. Over 1 million had been adversely affected. So in one way or another, furloughed, temporarily dismissed, or outright dismissed. The most vulnerable in this case were workers that had less than 1 year of experience, because they're in fact not protected by these dismissal laws. You can, if you have less than 1 year experience, the factory owner is not obligated to pay you these benefits. So they were the first ones to be dismissed. Again, overwhelmingly young women, over a very strong number from the villages, some of the most vulnerable workers in society. This is now some of my recent research. This is what I was up working on yesterday. This, to me, is really dramatic and really worrisome. These are imports to the U.S. market, billions of units. And it basically, I'll get my mouse here, it goes up, 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 up. And units is good because this is nothing about dollars, or so you don't have to worry about inflation. This is just what the U.S. imported by month, average by month, up till January 2020. And this is what's happened January, February, March, April, and May, the last 5 months. The volume being imported to the U.S. puts us back to 1997. is over 23 years of growth in the industry has disappeared. Over half of orders have dropped. So this is the drying up of new orders. And not only that, what is equally worrisome, this is now the price per unit of imported product. So this goes back to June 2019. What we see here, there was a spike in March, and I think because prices went up when the pandemic first hit, the price of fabric went up, but more recently, a dramatic squeeze down on price. So two things are going on simultaneously. There's less product being purchased, and what is being purchased, they're coming in at a lower price point. Don't make 100,000 units for me, make 20,000 units, and don't make it at a $2 price point, make it for me at a $1.80 price point. And you can do this because all these suppliers want orders, so everybody's desperate for orders, and it allows you to bargain. I started a survey, and this is very, very tentative. This is not meant to be broadly shared in that regard because the survey is in process. But I have 29 very solid responses, suppliers all over the world. And the question I asked is, if current patterns continue, how likely is it that you will be forced out of business? It's 26%. One quarter said extremely likely. 52% said somewhat likely. So if you combine those, you're getting 58, 78, almost 80% of suppliers say, meaning these orders stay as low as they are, they will be forced out of business. And when asked about the workers' side, I asked, how many workers did you have in your factories? And some had 2 or 3 factories. In January, on average, 2,384. How many do you have now? 2,156. How many do you anticipate having should trends continue? 1,700. So you see the dramatic decline and what this would mean for workers and employment. So just in a minute, I have to wrap up. What does this mean for workers? First, I see a triple squeeze, and in terms of the workers themselves, they're losing hours of work, they're losing income. If they're on lockdown, they're losing jobs in many cases, so they're getting squeezed on their family income. They're losing often spousal support because the crisis is not just for apparel, it's for all sectors of the economy, so unemployment is rising for all sectors of the economy. In many cases, they're losing family remittances. Many workers relied in times of crisis of a family member living abroad, but those family members are often now out of work. So garment workers, the remittances we studied went down by 83% since the crisis hit. In governments, we see there's few resources for social protection. So not like the US or elsewhere, you're not getting generous unemployment benefits and so on. And the impact has been dramatic, and the workers and unionists can say far more about this than I can, but we're seeing definite signs of an increase in hunger. Reports out of India of workers down to 1 meal a day. Reports out of Bangladesh of families living off of a sack of rice for weeks at a time. We're seeing, of course, the issue of COVID. Workers don't know where to go. Do I go back to my village? Do I go back to the city looking for work? And COVID is spreading in a lot of these countries. And we're seeing, this is general, not just garment workers. The World Bank is now anticipating 100 million workers will return to poverty as a result of the crisis. So the challenges are enormous. I just wanted to give you this big picture overview. We could talk later in the discussion about some potential solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark, for setting the scene. And a dramatic drop in orders, dramatic price squeeze, and then dramatic impact on workers and factories. So thanks for highlighting the triple squeeze. And so let's get some real impressions from the ground. And we have heard that GIZ Fabric was supporting a participatory photo project. And how did they do it? What was the intention? And what are we going to see for a couple of minutes will be explained by Eike Feddersen. She's the country coordinator for Myanmar of GIZ Fabric, and she will give us an introduction what we are going to see. So over to you, Eike.
Thank you, Joost, and good morning, good afternoon also from my side. My name is Eike Feddersen, and I also work for the regional project Fabric, and I have been based in Myanmar since early 2018. So what is this photo project, participatory photo project about? Well, the intention of our webinar today is to give a voice to workers who find, as we just heard, themselves at the end of the supply chain and are currently hit very hard. And we were wondering, what do they feel and how do they experience the COVID-19 crisis? And also, what would they want the outside world to know? But the question for us also was, how can we actually, through their eyes, understand how the current situation affects them? And yeah, from our perspective, photography is a very powerful tool to reflect and express feelings and emotions about a particular life situation. And we've seen it as a tool for advocacy and communication. And we've made experience with participatory photo projects already in 2018 and 2019, when we worked with a number of garment workers in both Myanmar and Cambodia. And so this basically means that back then, over several weeks, those workers learned from a professional photographer on how to use a camera as a vehicle for expressing their views on their life situation. And this was then paired with an approach to storytelling. The workers were asked to compose short texts, bringing in their messages to underline the photo story. And the results were absolutely great and very personal. And workers produced stories that were later screened in public exhibitions, photo festivals, and even published as photo books. And when we prepared for this webinar, we were lucky that we were able to pick up on this approach due to the very trustful relationship we have with the CTUM and the CTUM Women's Center, and as well the Women Union Network in Cambodia. So we worked with a few workers over the last couple of weeks and follow-up workshops with a photographer. I'm very delighted that we can release a selection of these works today. So we have a photo story from Ma May Thinjan Mo from Myanmar, and a photo story from Loy and Manika from Cambodia that reflect on their life situation, reveal their view at the world, and picture their thoughts, concerns, emotions, and dreams under COVID-19. Thank you very much, Ma May Thinjan Mo and Lo and Manika, for letting us see the world through your eyes. And I think with that, Joost, you can roll it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eike. And I'm going to share my screen again. And that's the biggest challenge, that I hope you will be able to see the video. So, and we overcome any sound challenges. So I will start now on 1, 2, 3 and start. So I think there were some impressive pictures and giving us a picture of what's happening in the industry, in the garment industry in Myanmar. So let me actually bring our speaker from Myanmar on board, and I would like to introduce again Ma Soleil. And Ma Soleil, you are a trade union leader and a seamstress in a clothing factory. So as a union leader, what concerns and questions does the presentation bring up for you? And are the issues raised in the story similar to what you see and hear from your fellow workers? And I would like to request all other speakers to switch off their webcam because so that we can focus on while the translator will translate what she will say. Soleil, can you switch on your camera? Yes.
Thanks. I'm very glad that I'm now being able to speak about the condition of Myanmar worker. So as we saw in the pictures, most of the migrant worker in our country are domestic migrant worker coming from the rural area. So they migrated to the industrial zone. So their life is very much cramped and end up being in a very crowded accommodation with a very small income. So their daily food intake needs to be very limited so that they end up being able to save for the money to be able to send back to their families, which is very important for them. So in terms of a working condition, in general term, the working condition, it's not a good one. The rest time, it's quite limited with a very long working hour. And they were asked to reach to a very heavy target on a daily basis. So basically their social life is not good, as well as their working condition is not good as well too. So all they care is to be able to do some saving so that they would be able to send money back home. So in this pandemic time, most of the garment factory worker faced the layoff. Their grievances has been addressed by the trade union. And the trade union has been targeted to be busted by the employer. So without the trade union, their benefit that they enjoy before the COVID time has been significantly reduced. So the trade union make a complaint why that kind of reduction had to be happened in this COVID time. And any worker, any trade union leader who stood for such kind of grievance got retaliation by the employer. So the trade union in Myanmar in general is still very young in terms of experience. So that's why we are very much in a disadvantaged position as a trade union. So at the moment, the general worker are facing the hardship in terms of paying the accommodation, in terms of affording their daily food, and in terms of their daily living cost. So at the moment, the main problem is that the unemployment, it's the main problem. And some of the factory owner just unilaterally closed the factory and ran away. And the workers working for that particular factory end up being unpaid and not being able to go back home and find their own way for a place to sleep. So in terms of a factory closure, we have a temporary operation suspended, and we also have some of the factory completely closed down. And if it would be the temporary closure of a factory, the factory owner often claim that the worker has been paid all the proper compensation. Yes, it is true. But the thing is that the compensation by law is very little. It cannot even make ends meet. So the trade union claimed that when the factory reopened to reinstate all the dismissed workers. But in fact, when they actually reopened the factory, they deliberately left out the trade union member to be reinstated. So some of the factory even have a blacklisted name from the trade union, so that it is very difficult for the trade union member to get the job back when the factory reopen again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soleil, Jezebel. And this was very clear, a very detailed description of what's happening on the ground in Myanmar. And we also have colleagues from Cambodia, so we also want to show a little bit the impressions, what's happening in Cambodia. And I'm gonna start again with a short video, and then we will hear also some observations and insights from our colleagues in Cambodia. So I will share my screen one more time, and I hope this will work without problems. And share. And I'm gonna start my video now.
trong gió thì dằm đi một về tam mô con hát biết ra ngày đi có ngày trái cùng ban sóc nghĩ ca cũng rồi một son bia ca mình ở trong ngoài đi ba la ngài sống còn nắp nó phục nè phải chú đột thái mình cần rộng rộng gian tiếp tục xem một đuôi gió thật đẹp mình ta ta ngày đã ban chú mai nhà thu kịp khuyên nêu là trong gió thì cầm đi một về tam mô con hát biết ra ngày đi có ngày trái cùng ban sóc ca con số một son bia ca mình ở trong bài đi ba la
So, thank you very much for this wonderful impressions from Cambodia. Very emotional for me. So, Ken Cheng Lang, like Sule, you're also closely connected with workers on the ground. So, is the story we have just seen representative of how garment workers in Cambodia have experienced the current pandemic?
Yes. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Cheng Lang. I'm Vice President of Confederation of Cambodian Worker Movement. We work with the five sector in Cambodia, like garment worker, construction, domestic worker, casino, and hotel worker, and craftsmen in Cambodia. Yeah. And however, so regarding to the video about the photo story about the Manika and Lois. They are the couple, and they now see her pregnant like 2.5 months. The Manika, yes, Manika see pregnant. Yes, it is the typical of many workers. It is very difficult for suspended workers who are surviving with the $70 for emergency fund, like $30 from the factory and $40 from government, and this very difficult, not enough to pay bill for them. They have to pay electricity bill every month and pay rent. And the worker, they have to repay payment to the bank that they loan from the bank, and some they pay for children's school. So very difficult to survive with the $70. It's very, very, very sad. Yeah, very sad for worker in Cambodia. Yes, this not enough for Cambodia. Yeah, and another thing. Some workers have only received 1 or 2 payment only from the government until now. Yes, have only this very difficult for them because the they have been out of work for months. It is because of the delay of the payment with the system. The government said they pay them $40 a month when they suspend work or lose job, but until now, sometimes worker they lose job from like March until now this July. Only one time they pay and pay only $20 only, not 40 like government said. This is very difficult because sometimes from the system, sometimes the government delay to pay them. It's very difficult for them. And others like for worker, they work on short-term contract. Yes, big problem with them. And when their contract is finished, they only longer have to write for government support. Yeah. No longer for government to support them. And there's it's very few job. However, they can to survive. This is a big problem in Cambodia, you see in photo. Sorry, this only them may a lot of things in. A lot of happen in Cambodia now because it's affected by COVID-19. A lot of factory they close, they suspend worker. Like on the history, you see before the factory they used like 1,050 workers. Now only 60, and they reduce every month. So this is very difficult for worker in Cambodia. Thank you.
Jesobe, thank you, Cheng Lang, for sharing the on-the-ground situation in Cambodia. Let me go to Mr. Kongatit. Bong Kongatit, you have heard Cheng Lang already shared about the situation of garment workers in Cambodia and what they are currently experiencing in the COVID-19 situation. I would like to move the discussion now a little bit to the bigger picture. You are the president of the Coalition of Cambodian Apparel Workers Democratic Union, which is associated with the garment industry call to action. And I would like to tell us what action you'd like to see from an international perspective and how effective have international platforms been in getting people to hear your claims. Bong Kongatit.
Sorry. Yes, good to see you all again. So thank you for colleague previous speakers. So it was very inspiring to hear all the story. So yeah, exactly. I am the member of the Call to Action Committee, and I am representing industry all, the global union in the garment and textile leather industry. So, and I am also the co-chair of the global textile, garment and shoe industry. So actually the crisis also, you know, if we can think as the opportunity that to wake up the global union and also partner and other stakeholders that need to be stronger, we need to be more united, that we can respond to such a big crisis like this. So now we have initiated the global call to action that try to respond to the crisis. So this is one of the you know, like respond that we want to looking for the fund, and we want to looking for the respond to the immediate need and the long-term need. But what we also need is the clear and transparent agreement with the brand, because this global call for action is only partly that could probably we can get some money that we can provide to the urgent need of the workers, like we have seen from the 2 videos. But the other important action that the union now, now the industry all just decided the new resolution that the industry all union around the world will run a campaign against the bad actors, like the brand who didn't pay their orders and the suppliers together with the brand that discriminate against the union. So this action is started slowly, because we has been working with the brand, with the other social partner, that we need to improve, we need to work on social dialogue. We all need peaceful and the what you call a trusted dialogue. But when it doesn't work, and spends too much of a long time, so you may know that the worker live day by day, and then if we spend 1 year or 2 years to just respond to this urgent thing, this is not work. So that's why currently the unions and the global union from different sectors as well, we want to call for a bipartite agreement with the brand and the supplier. So basically, to respond, like we want to talk them with them, but if they don't want to talk and then they try to get away and all the time, so we need to do something. So that's why the union in the global industry family, in an industry all family, we decided to initiate a campaign that to bring brand to sit on the table and to negotiate in a good faith. So we want 3 things that maybe the colleague from Myanmar already mentioned that. So firstly, we want a transparency of layoff and suspension. Why? And we also want the brand to take action that to stop the supplier to use the COVID-19 to fire a union leader. So we want a clear agreement on that part. So not just like the supplier said, okay, we need to suspend 300 workers, but 150 is union activists already. So we don't want to have that situation. And secondly, we want to ask the brand to support, to complement to the global call for action, because at the moment we don't have any money yet. The urgent money that's supposed to get to support the worker in the urgent time has not been here. It's still debating, and the employer and the supplier and the brand has different perspective, and their supplier has different perspective. So we need that urgent money. Maybe the brand and need to support this urgent fund that to complement with the global call for action. And the last, that this international campaign and calling for what you call a good faith negotiation is to cover the recovery after the reality. The union, we can send it. We can understand some supplier, they face with difficulty, but those difficulty need to be transparent and take very clear accountability to what it should be respond to it, not just from the word of employer only and try to reuse everything, but the worker doesn't know. That's why we want the thing that include in the agreement, that the transparency also at the recovery, like the employer that fire the worker illegally, pay them illegally, so the brand need to take action and to call their supplier to stop all this behavior. Yeah.
Very much perspective, and I am already realizing time is passing very fast. So first of all, if you see a poll on the right side, we still have half an hour. But if you have to leave early, we would like to request you on the way out of the webinar to leave some feedback, but please do it only if you have to leave early. Otherwise, ignore it until you have to leave, because we still have some more interaction with our speakers, as well as a comment by Dr. Stephen Frost. So actually prepared 3 more questions for every speaker, but I realized that all of you have already touched the question. Let me quickly see the participants, if they have already given us a number of questions, and this can also include Professor Mark Enner. I think it would be nice to get a little bit more active with our audience. So I already see one question actually to Kongatit, and then hopefully more questions come in. Otherwise, I will have 2 or 3 more questions for our speakers. So Kongatit, and maybe also the other colleagues, some of the brands and retailers committed to the global call to action have not honored their contract with their suppliers. For example, canceled orders and not paying for reduced orders. Isn't their committing to the global call for action just a cover-up, a new form of greenwashing? Maybe, Kongatit, you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I think one answer is time will show. If it's just the window dressing, you know, nothing show reality at the ground, that could be a very good question. That this call might not produce the global call for action initiative might not you know, the real elephant or the real tiger, you know. So because it takes too long at the moment, we're still pushing, and some it's quite complicated to worker to understand as well. So I think at the moment we are trying to use the complement action to push this become real, like the global union are now you know, we try to call for the campaign and try to make it, you know, realistic for worker, because at the moment it could be 50 and 50, you know, because they keep getting money from different financial institutions, and you know, so Cambodia is the first country that started the national global call for action committee, but it was a bit very confusing. So the employer does not even understood what they don't need it. They just claim the brand to keep the order in Cambodia, not send the order to Vietnam. But the brand want to push for global fund to respond to this. So it's quite complicated. So that's why I would say like 50-50. So to me, all the time in my experience, we need to build a strong force to make it become real. If we are waiting for this to become real, I am very you know, very not convincing, not confident that thing will become real without our strong push from the union. Yeah.
I still have 2 short questions to Chen Lang and to Soleil. So maybe I start with Chen Lang first and then Soleil. Chen Lang, COVID-19 has made it difficult to maintain links with workers, and this has presented challenges. As a member of the Women Union Network in Cambodia, can you share how personally, but also fellow women union leaders have experienced the crisis and how the work of unions is affected by the pandemic? And afterwards, I will ask Soleil also about how her trade union supports and protect garment workers. So Chen Lang first and then Soleil.
Okay, thank you, brother. Union network. Before I start, I have to use Women Union Network. Yeah. We call WUN. This women platform. We come from like 17 union come across together to discuss and to find ways to address issues impacting to workers. This the union network. Yeah. During the COVID-19 crisis, it's difficult to contact with the member. Yes, when they lose work, and we try to limit meeting to prevent the spread out of this disease, like CUMW. We and other union the same. We learn a new way to communicate with the member by using new technology. So this but everyone is still learning and learning. So it is very it is not easy for us. So we try to negotiate, like to communicate with them by telephone, sometimes by Facebook chat. So very difficult, and we have new technology also, like web like Zoom, like Google Meet. So, but we still learn, learn. So very difficult for us to use new technologies. Yes. Personally, we have experience to family members lose job. Lose job, like example is my family store. My family is we affected with the trade with the COVID-19. Like my daughter, she get job. She work with the like emergent like tourist agency, But now see the company, they suspend workers for 3 months without pay. So now we only my family also they be affected with the COVID-19. Yes. So the union also they affect you, like lose income because of the reduction membership fee. Yeah. So now not only worker, we trade union leader also, yeah, we affect with the COVID-19. Thank you.
Jezebel, thank you. And I see that Hausi, you also asked the same question I asked to Masule. So Masule, you as the Vice President of the Industrial Workers Federation of Myanmar, what is your organization doing to support and protect garment workers? And I want to request all other speakers to switch one more time off their webcam so we can all focus on Sule while she's speaking, while you hear the translation.
As our federation, during this COVID time, the worker has huge concern. Our member have had huge concern for their future. So during the movement restriction, they tried to go back home. And some of our workers managed to reach home. But then when some of the restriction has been relaxed, they worried that they would not be able to make to where the factory is. And they also worry that they will get their job back. So having that kind of emotional concern and stress, our federation established hotlines in order to respond their concern, their question. So we received from April, May, June, in this 3 months time, we received over 6,000 calls, wondering what's going to happen when the factory would open, how they would submit the absent application if they could not reach to the factory while they were at home. And some of the goals had to do with the questions on the reduction on their salary and on their benefit. And for that, the Federation talked with the factory management on why and how to find a solution in order for them to receive their normal incomes. And when the factory reopened, the factory are to comply with the guideline of the Ministry of Health to make sure that there is no infection. So the social distancing and all the other health measures are to be complied at the factory level. And once we received information from the worker that the health measures were not complied in the factory, then the Federation talked with the responsible government agency in order to make sure that the necessary safety and measures are implemented at that particular factory. And the disputes handling, it's another area that our Federation helps, because in this COVID time, we find out that there are more disputes raised by the worker, and the state mechanism is not an ideal mechanism that is trusted by the worker. So the Federation is working together with the other organization in terms of advocating to amend the state mechanism in addressing the disputes of the worker. And another significant movement is that some of our members would run an election campaign for the upcoming election as the independent candidate in order for them to be able to have a seat or several seats in the parliament in order to address the worker issue by the worker, with the ambition that they would become the parliamentarian themselves. And another involvement of the Federation is that to develop, it's developing the freedom of association guideline, which would make sure that the freedom of association principle will be complied in the factory. So this is ongoing process that the Federation engaged. With the freedom of association guideline implemented at the factory level, the industrial relation will become much more matured and the worker rights will be protected. So these are what Federation involved in protecting the workers in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Soleil. Quick question to you. How many factories have been suspended so far? Sina Sok would like to know.
Estimately speaking, there has been around 40 factories being suspended.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I have a question for Mark Enner from Kuhn from the Fairway Foundation. What are your suggestions to change the behavior of the brands? Maybe answer in 2 minutes so that we can take also some more questions.
Great. Thank you. Well, it's a big, important question. I always mention this idea of bipartite bargaining. I sometimes refer to triangular bargaining. I think any of these solutions, and it's so important to have the voices of these workers and union leaders in this conversation. It's what some of us are calling worker-driven social responsibility. So I think it starts with workers in countries discussing what living wages are, what safe working conditions are, with the right to refuse unsafe work, and then moving to a discussion triangular, workers, suppliers, and brands, to make sure that the contractual arrangements are done in such a way that the price point is sufficient to cover living wages and safe working conditions, and that workers aren't just passive members of this process, but are active in the supervision, the implementation, and so on. I think we have to rethink this entire model just to have those workers' voices involved. Because I think, in my view, and what I've studied, some of these voluntary initiatives have not been able to, at really crucial moments, and this is a crucial moment, this is a moment when workers are actually facing hunger, they haven't had the ability to force brands to do what they might not otherwise do. So we need some form of binding mechanism with worker voice involved and negotiations and worker supervision of implementation.
Maybe a quick follow-up question from Hitendra Parekh. Maybe, Mark, you take that one. In your opinion, because you try to see the overall situation in the region, when will it be normal production looking at the present situation? What's normal in any case?
That's a great question. And I cannot give you a clear answer, especially sitting in the US, because every time I get up in the morning, I see new COVID cases here, which means the United States market in many cities, Florida, is going back into lockdown. Yeah. So we thought we were going to get through this. The stores would open. There would be a period of time when companies were going to try to sell old inventory. They stocked up inventory they couldn't sell during the pandemic. So there was always going to be a drop in demand, but at some point that would pick up again. The European market, by and large, is back online, and there will be an increase in demand there. The best estimate in the Bangladeshis, for example, the Suppliers Association, anticipate from this point forward, they'll be at 55% capacity to the end of the year. 45% will be, so it's not only just which factories shut down, it's which are on reduced hours. They might be at a half workload or half hours. I think it's going to take at least a year before we approach order levels. I want to say go back to normal. What was normal wasn't working, but a year to get to those order levels. What we need to do between now and then is ensure that as supply chains are reestablished, they're done so with greater equity and worker participation, as I was mentioning earlier.
Okay, I see the time that we have approximately 6-7 minutes before I hand over to Stephen Frost. And maybe I would like to hear from everybody 1 or 2 minutes about how could solutions look like that they work for both workers and producers. I mean, you know that our series is called Going Through the Crisis Together. Of course, there are different approaches and the trade unions. We heard about the campaigning by Kongatit. So what would maybe a solution where workers and producers maybe can find a way out or mitigate the consequences in a better way? And do you have hope for that if there is no solution to be on the horizon in the moment? Maybe I start with Mark and then I go over to Cheng Lang, Suley, and then Kongatit as a last speaker.
Okay, great. You're saying the manufacturers and workers.
Yes.
Not the brand. Absolutely. I mean, this is what's so crucial. When you sell a shirt and you look at that price, that let's even say $10, the piece that stays in Myanmar or Cambodia or Bangladesh, somewhere, that percentage, the value, it's about 16%. And workers and factory owners are fighting over that 16%. And the rest is going into retail, like in shipping and so on. It goes outside. The value for the sales point for the shirt sells. There's a key space for an alliance here, and that's the triangular bargaining. Let's sit and discuss, producers and workers, what is the cost of decent work with sustainable development, environmental protection. And let's make, as a group, this has to be reflected in the price point. What we've been to is sort of the opposite, is that locally over the smallest piece of the pie, the two sides are fighting like crazy with each other, when there really is a strategic interest in working together with full respect for workers' rights and worker participation.
Thank Mark. Cheng Lang, you heard Professor Mark Anna. Is there a solution on the horizon for better working together, producers and workers?
Okay, thank you. And from my side, I think we should be a collaboration between brand, factory, and workers, and union, and government. It's important to find a solution because it's three parties in Cambodia, especially in brand. They should have to contract or something like to do something better to order to give to order to supplier, like the brand to have to give to order to the factory, and then the government, it should be plays an important role to provide support to the worker to who are without income, and to work with the industry. Yes, to ensure fair that it is all business practice and contribute in condition in the future. I think like that is they should work together like three parties. Yes, in Cambodia.
So what could a solution look like so that they work for both workers and manufacturers, and what things we need to consider here?
In order to respond this perspective, let me talk about how we anticipate the impact of this pandemic. We have already anticipated all the negative impact on the worker. So once the virus has been spread in China, we already inform our affiliates that that infection would come into Myanmar. If it would be the case, it would have a direct impact on the worker. So you better start talking with the management how to address the working condition, how to address the employment, how to address the crisis should be the topic that the affiliate should discuss with the management. So this is constantly the message that we inform to our affiliates. And our affiliate did approach the management, but the affiliate at the factory level were not welcome to discuss this kind of collaboration from our side. So basically, I would conclude that we don't have the available platform in order to discuss with the management at the supplier level. But in fact, they received the negative treatment from the management once the affiliate at the factory level raised this concern. But we, the Federation, is the affiliate of Industrial Oil. The Industrial Oil Global Framework is the tool that we utilize in order to bring the supplier around the negotiation and discussion tables. So we try to engage with the supplier, the employer, in order to find the joint solution. And the government, it's also in the same position of that they do not listen to us. But anyway, we have our way to proceed, and we will continue to proceed trying to engage with them. And at the moment, since the upcoming election is there, so we have our walker candidate to run for the elections as well. Hopefully, we will establish our own way to address these issues in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sule, and good luck with the elections for your candidates. And I will call one more time on Kongatit. You also heard the difficult circumstances in Myanmar. So what's your hope for the future, Kongatit? And I will unmute you.
Sorry. For me, I think the better, like the professor has shared, the better thing is the union, the employers. We need to understand stability, and from this kind of crisis, we have to fight and avoid the party that taking advantage. So we have to be clear on that. We have to really pay full attention on and show the public that the brand and the supplier is trying to take the advantage. So this is very clear. We need to have fact finding on that. And then we need to put pressure on the brand. Of course, brand and supplier, we want to, nobody can do what they cannot do. So we have to bring them on the clear sky that this is what they can do. So if they still can, they still don't want to do what they can do, then I mean, there's no doubt that we need to complain them, and we need to campaign against them. So let's focus on what we can do, and push them to do it, and also work together to do more, to learn how to achieve what is causing by the crisis, and learning how to solve the thing that we cannot solve at the moment together. So that is what should be the forward or the next step. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kongatit, and thank you to all the speakers so far. We have approximately only 2 minutes left. We're going to extend for another 5 minutes. If you have to rush out, please do our exit poll. And now I would like to introduce you, and if you're a regular in our webinars, you know him already, our commentator, Dr. Stephen Frost. He's also the director at Go Blue, and a sustainability accelerator company, and also the editor of the Go Blue blog, the Fashion Sustainability Week in Review. And he listened very carefully to all of you, and he's going to share maybe 3 reactions. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Joost. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the photographs in the videos. It takes a lot of skill to capture a story in a photograph, and some of those photographs really did that. So pass on my admiration to those people. So my 3 things. The first one was something that Mark said, which was about the price squeeze. I think this price squeeze between wages and lead times, but also a price squeeze around prices being pushed down, as Mark's graph showed very beautifully, and the amount of money that factories are being forced to spend on improving things, but with no price increase of their products. I thought I was really also taken by the graph that Mark showed about US import. The US import chart, I think, is the chart of the week. And we're back 23 years ago in terms of US imports. That is amazing, and we've seen a price drop in product prices coming in. for apparel. Fantastic stuff. Second one is something that Kong Atit said. We need a clear and transparent agreement with brands. Brands need to come to the table and negotiate, and they need to do that in good faith. And very interested to hear that Industrial Global Union, with a new resolution to run a campaign against bad actors. Now, the campaign against bad actors has been going on for some time. There's, the Pay Up campaign. There's, Mark has been involved in, setting the groundwork with his report in April, on non-payment for Bangladesh factories. But there's been quite a lot of that stuff. But so interesting to see that now coming into a much bigger, more sort of powerful actor. And then finally, I just listening to all the people, Soleil, Cheng Lang, and Kong Atit, and what they really made me think about is something that's often avoided, and that is what's the relationship between brands and factory workers. Now, from the brand perspective, there is no relationship, which kind of takes me back to the 1990s, early 90s, when Phil Knight, the founder and then CEO of Nike, saying we had no legal liability, we had no moral responsibility with regard to Indonesian factories, and the workers making Nike shoes. And then the next 20 years, Nike spent kind of trying to deal with that comment. Oh, in fact, we do have a moral responsibility. But what the people here are talking about tonight is something more than that. That answer of we don't have a relationship with workers, we've outsourced our risk, is harder to pursue since workers have started going hungry as a direct result of brands not paying for work completed or in process. So in this morning's newsletter, the newsletter that I sent out this morning, there's a very interesting story in there about a new consortium called Mind the Gap, which looks at the strategies that brands and retailers are using to avoid responsibility for human rights abuses. I'm going to put the URL in the chat thing in a minute. And I'm just clicking on the website. And one of the things that brands are doing is constructing deniability. We deny we have a it's up to the factories to pay a particular wage. That's all in the supply chain. Constructing deniability, avoiding liability through legal strategies, or distracting and obfuscating or confusing stakeholders. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but certainly well worthwhile thinking about. And I think, just listening to the speakers from Cambodia and Myanmar this evening, or my evening, really made me think about that. And it's much harder, I think, now for brands to push that gap between them and workers. And I'll just finish on something that Kong Atit said, which is that as we come out of the recovery, whatever strategies we develop now to deal with this need to be kept in place and not wither away as the US starts buying again and the Europeans start buying again and everything goes back to, what it was before. Goodness knows when that will be, but, that we lose all of that. So, very interesting stuff. Back to you, Joost. Thank you very much. I'll put the thing in the chat, okay, the URL in the chat.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Excellent. And I think you make me think again, and I have to reflect on what you said. However, we're coming to the end of the webinar, and I'm going to share just an outlook for the next webinar in a second. I also wanted to mention that if you have been a member of this webinar or participant in this webinar, you will receive a link for the video as well as or a video of this webinar, but you will also receive the links, hopefully, for the YouTube's videos that will be uploaded either on YouTube or somewhere else, so that you can share the stories of the workers more. And I hope you can see my screen. Tentatively, Thursday, August 6th, we have the next webinar in our Asian Dialogue series, webinar 7, How Can Suppliers Deal with liquidity bottlenecks, and this will be organized in collaboration with the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles. You will receive more information via email and on the usual platforms. So please take note. It's only tentative, but we try to confirm the date as soon as possible.